Hey there. Welcome to day 270, 365 days towards racial change. I'm Tomlin's Nyback. Happy to be with you. Glad we are under the 100-day mark. 100 days, under 100 days left to go. Playing a little catch up here. Thank you for your good vibes, your prayers, your concern, and for checking in on old Tomlin's Nyback as we're on our way to wrapping up this incredible year of education, awareness, expression. I know this project's taken me places that I only kind of dreamed about, that I had no idea were so real and so embedded in American life. I mean, on that note, how do Black people understand their position in America? Do we realize the documents that define America, define Blacks as a group and how Blacks are orientated in the American landscape? No other group, not even white people, are explicitly mentioned and orientated in the way that Black people are. If we're wondering, have this crushing concern about why Black people are where they are in America and all this stuff, we can turn to what's written down that's been in place for 200 years. And before that, of course, with the institution of slavery. But, towards the end of the 1700s, it was codified. The science of slavery had grown to the point where they could now write it down, codify, establish, in their minds and some of the minds of some of these white men. There was no end to slavery, overt social injustice, marginalization. That this was, they had in mind, this would be the status quo. Now, we haven't gotten that far away from it. It's still very much alive and expresses itself all over the place every day. It's just that we pushed it underground, so to speak, with various laws, the 60s, stuff like that. But all it says is you just can't overtly oppress. But trust me, people, if they want, when they want, are doing all kinds of stuff in the background. Stuff you can't prove, right? I mean, how does the best person, well, let's make color equal, but how does the best person in a blue-collar environment get passed over twice for promotion? Well, there's some color. You introduce color into there, and then it makes sense. Oh, he's a Black man. Okay, we could screw with him a little bit more and stuff like that, but we'll let the younger people of other colors, have that shot. Is racism, and it's raced because I say it is. I define what is raced at me. The same way a sexual assault survivor defines their sexual assault. Doesn't matter that the perpetrator thought there was consent, that the perpetrator may think there was, a willingness, on this other individual's part. If the other individual gets up from that experience and says they are violated, then the weight of their testimony, has some power and validity in the world. Same should go for racism. We would see a different world if we had applied that consistent rubric from sexual assault into racism. Both are hard, challenging to prove, minus direct testimony from a perpetrator, but not impossible. On the flip side, white folks, I think that the white folks that are close to me in my life, I don't see them having a racist bone in their body. I just wouldn't be associating with a racist, and a racist personality and my personality would just not mix. Even if we were like faking it, it would come out. It wouldn't happen. But maybe you're a racist watching some of these videos. I don't know. These are public. And you're a racist watching these videos. It'd be interesting, like, if you could watch these videos and walk away with no conviction of the implications of if you're a white racist, of your position, power, privilege, expectation of favor in the world, how fortunate you are to have been born on the white side of life. But then, I scratch my head every couple days because I know this project is pretty close to me. And every couple days I'm like, it's purely evil for a person who's got everything to still find some reason to oppress, beat down, discriminate against challenged people. It's like if I went around and started building stairs among a community of people in wheelchairs, or if I had one eye and I was in a blind community and I start erecting barriers and stuff and changing the landscape of that space. The line in the movie, I forget the movie right off the hand, but it says, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. But that's what racism is like. I've got privilege, I'm there, but let me still put my elbow in your neck and beat you down. It makes no sense. Well, probably it makes sense that for the racist, it's a right thing and right way to be and right thing to do. But it is not when you break down the arguments or justifications or whatever, it's just ludicrous across the board. Get your financial house in order. One way for blacks to fight back, to assert themselves, to participate, is to come along the economic lines. Now you see that in a obvious degree with our sports people, entertainers, and all. They've got that money, so you see them in white circles and being part of the white landscape, so to speak. But that's just not the general practice for more black people, I'll say. We want more black people to experience that kind of life here in America. Such a rich land, rich little nation, so it says. You know. So get your financial house in order. Just a way to come up and participate, be respected, and stuff like that. If you've got the finances to kind of keep up. You want your money to work harder for you in the future than it does now. You need to understand inflation, that your dollar is being eroded, the power of your dollar is being eroded and devalued over time, and a lot of that discussion. You need to keep that in place as you move forward. If you're a person like me recovering from massive debt and making poor financial decisions, you need to stop doing that. Have a whole cessation of making poor decisions and start getting on board with the things you need to know, consistently practice, and accomplish financially. Very important. Now I'm inspired to do all of this work by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson, and he's written 3 of his works. He's all over YouTube, easy to find, and he talks about these subjects much more better in detail. He's done a lot of research. He's much older than me, so he's got some experience as well. First book I read, which we've spent some considerable time talking in, we're going to definitely get back to this. This is another resource that I would like to finish before the end of the year. I got to do some math and see what our pace is on that. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice, and Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America, Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com. Behind me, you'll see the hashtag #us2 symbol. You'll find black women conversing, supporting one another in their experience. Check out Blag Enough, BLAGGENUF, for that experience. Finding groups and other people to fellowship with and commune with. If you can't find your flavor here on the World Wide Web, do what I did, start your own little community and see where you can go. And finally, like I said, we're going to get to story time. We might stay here until we get finished. This is the resource where I definitely want to finish. Other stuff will come in a distant second. So we are back in Uncle Tom's Cabin. If you have the book, we're in chapter 34, the Quadroon's story. We're going to talk about Cassy. We met her a little while. Just a chapter or 2 ago. We're going to be talking about her. And so that's where we're at, okay? Day 270 here. All right, the Quadroon story. This is part 1. We split it into 2 parts because they're about halfway through the short chapter. It gets pretty dense and explaining Cassy's story a little bit. But the first part of the chapter is kind of a review. Cassy appears and she's ministering to Tom. Remember, Tom got escorted out of the scale house where they come bring their cotton to be weighed to see if they've been goofing off in the field or if they're maintaining their quota. And it's harvest time, high time. So these slave masters are pretty particular about weights and effectiveness, and I'm sure everybody was probably graded by ages and weights, ability, everything. These slaves going out and getting this cotton. So a movie, I think it was Sally Fields, years ago. Danny Glover played a slave, but um, slavery had kind of ended. But she had inherited a cotton field or something, so she had to bring in this harvest for money and feed and stuff like that. Anyway, she got she's out there in the fields, and there's a scene where she's crying because these pods, these cotton pods, all cotton, right? It's nice and soft and all that. It's inside of a pod, right? And you gotta the pod what the cotton is ready for harvest when the pod pops. But if you are lived in the woods or are familiar with woods and you've seen a plant or a weed where its flower is in a pod, you know that when that pod pops and dries out, it's like razor sharp blades, right? So the normal slave, their fingers were calloused, built. Their fingers were built up, calloused, you know, because they had to navigate the sharp pods all day long. Well, she, innocent little white woman, tore her hands all up, so she was in tears. But this is what's happening. So this at harvest time, you know, it's just so challenging. So Simon Legree, he's there at the scale house wanting everybody their weight and stuff like that. Well, already the rumor's been around because if you remember, Tom, he's given his cotton to other slaves who maybe haven't got their weight together and stuff like that. And Legree hears about it from Sambo, right? We were introduced to Sambo and Quimbo, two slaves who are Legree's punitive arm on the plantation. So anyway, Tom and Legree have some words. After Legree knocks Tom around in front of the plantation and stuff, all the people, he tells Sambo and Quimbo, take him out for further punishment, right? So now we're back, and we're here at the top of chapter 34. Tom is recovering, and apparently he's taken a pretty good beating from Sambo and Quimbo. They're experts at their craft of inflicting pain on slaves. Now, these are two black men, right? Remember slavery? But the institution was so normalized that even before the Civil War, there were upwards of 6,000 black folks who owned black slaves. That's how normal the institution was. And we could talk about economic differences and stuff like that too, where you could be in a position to own a slave, being black. Interesting. So Tom's recovering. In comes Cassy. And at the beginning of the chapter there's a lot of coloration about a relationship with God, calling on God, remembering the stripes of Jesus, and things like that. And if you saw Mel Gibson's The Passion, that gives you some illustration, or any The Greatest Story Ever Told, any of those Jesus crucifixion movies, even The Robe, Barabbas, some of those Bible movies. That's what Tom has in his head. He's trying to encourage Cassy in her faith. She's given up a long time ago. Cassy, the title is the Quadroon's story. So Cassy is this very lovely Quadroon woman, right? And these are she's one of the offspring of a white slave master laying down with his black slave mistress, right? A lot of, you talk about return on investment. You got a slave, and your slave can produce more labor, You know, that's quite a capitalization there if you look at things uh, purely from an accounting aspect. That's what a deal. Um, could you imagine if you could go and produce more tractors, more cattle? If these guys could do that, we got to do it with money today, but back then, slave master wants to increase his workforce. Well, you got to all these concubines you can impregnate and double, triple your workforce almost overnight, so to speak. Cassy's a product of that, those kind of unions. And so she's coming in and she's tending to Tom's wounds. They're going back and forth about faith. Cassy casts hers off. Tom stays committed. We're not surprised at either testimony there at that point. Cassy's like, look, you're out in the middle of nowhere, 10 miles from the nearest piece of civilization and in the middle of a swamp. You can't be resisting and stuff like that. She says, look, they can cut you up, burn you alive, give you to the dogs, whip you to death, ad infinitum, and there is no law, no witness to vouch for you, to testify, and stuff like that. And the South did have some loose regulations concerning how to treat slaves and stuff like that, but those were just writing and symbols on the wall. The laws that were followed, enacted, and stuff like that was when a black person offended a white person. Then you get the system really working hard. But Frederick Douglass' testimony. His testimony. He's got a testimony saying he was an eyewitness to a black man being shot in the face and killed by a slave handler. No charges, trials, none of that ever happened. That's not the way. So Tom is kind of in a hopeless situation. Can't run away. Navigating swamps and stuff like that. He's kind of stuck there. And Cassy is telling him the truth. She also reiterates, don't trust any of the slaves, which they may be reeling from meritorious manumission. Remember, meritorious manumission, putting the slave's life below the master's life, helping production, making life better for white folks. Gave the black person the possibility of freedom. Well, freeing black people for their good behavior was not the intent of meritorious manumission. Meritorious manumission was to keep the slaves paranoid of one another, because they're giving up and informing, looking for this meritorious manumission. So there's no trust between black folks on the plantation. Cassy seeing these type of dedicated, willful characters before, and she's saying, don't try to be like that. She comments on Emmeline. Remember, Emmeline is the brand new light-skinned female that Legree brought. She's 14 years old, and Emmeline is trying to hold out because Legree, he's got these women for sexual intent. They're not to be out in the field and stuff like that. He bought these concubines for himself. And Harriet Beecher Stowe is not very explicit about the sexuality, but it's evident and highly implied throughout the text. Now, especially as we get later in the text, she illustrates it more without explicitly saying that there's, along with all the slavery issues and abuses going on, in the world, in the South, there's this other sexual component that she needs to mention. Now, it's the mid-1800s. She can't be explicit on, but if you read my description, I'm saying, like, had she been writing today, you'd see very explicit language and illustrations probably about this dynamic between these white slave masters and their black slave mistresses on the plantation. Cassy's like, they'll kill you if you keep this up, but Tom, he's holding on to his faith. He's trusting Jesus, and on we know. Not surprised by Tom's dedication, devotion here. Cassy, she starts her story, and we'll end with this. We're going to pick up and elaborate on her story more tomorrow. But she's like, look, my father died suddenly. Now, what is not really explicit in the narrative is that her father was a white slave master who happened to have strong feelings for the black woman that he laid down with. And this is something that the affections and intentions with these white slave masters and these black women, which were probably lighter skinned as well, brought about all kinds of laws against whites and blacks marrying. That's a whole nother subject. We've touched on that before, earlier in the year as well. But anyway, her father died. Now, her father actually had intentions of setting her free. You know, hopefully we got in the text now, you know, these white men are always dragging their damn feet about freeing their slaves, whether from marriage, sex, or whether the slave is just a good person or whatever. Oh, they always want to go drink first, or they die suddenly and stuff like that. You know, Stowe's text is fictional, but I bet you that happened a lot. You know. So anyway, he dies suddenly, and he has debts. These slave masters, a lot of them gamble and stuff like that. So we don't know exactly what his debts are tied to, but he has enough, so he's got to liquidate. And she doesn't have her emancipation papers, so she is included in the lot for liquidation. So she gets sold to a young man for $2,000. Now, some of the highest prices for a slave on average, some of the research I've done, was upwards of $1,800. So she had went to a convent and stuff like that. So this guy, a white man, had saw her before or after. Now she's grown up. She's probably slender and everything is really working, very sexually desirable and stuff like that. He pays $2,000 for her. So it's an extra $200 above the highest average paid for slaves at the height of slavery. So he really wanted this woman bad. And what better guarantee of compliance and peace in the home than to buy your wife? You know, it's up there with mail-over brides and stuff like that we may find today. So he's like, gives $2,000, takes her. He lays down with her, has 2 children, and he's out about town and all this stuff. Brings her into his house, buys her luxury, all this stuff. But he never marries her. Right? Now, there's already laws in the books against it and stuff like that, so there's those issues and all that. So, but he's like, you know, doing everything except signing on the dotted line. So tomorrow we'll pick up and see the outcome. You know, something obviously happened because now she's not with him. She's with Legree, being Legree's sexual partner, and when she's bad, she gets tossed out, has to do some work in the field. If you remember, have you ever seen a movie, The Django Unchained, Jamie Foxx, Leonardo DiCaprio, and some other actors in there? I don't watch the movie because of this understanding this material. Watching that movie is a little disturbing for me, but I do remember seeing the woman that Jamie Foxx is after has been disobedient or whatever, and Leonardo DiCaprio then throw her in a hole, in a shallow water hole in the front yard, and lock her up there in the cold naked. So, you know, it's a challenging dynamic. So, but I forget where I was going with that. But we're going to get into more of um, this dynamic tomorrow and see what happened with Cassy and um, the man that apparently loved her. She reciprocated these affections too, but now she's with Legree as his concubine. So some complications happen there. Listen, I'm not going to hold you hostage. We're going to get back to this tomorrow. Tune in, and we'll stay on point and on task. It's day 270 out of the way. I'm not signing. Tomlin's not back. Oh, for 365 days towards racial change, and see you tomorrow.